Nuno had a dream to build a football team. Chinese owners and a wonder kid from Porto. I can't be bothered to sing the rest of the chant, so let's get straight into the episode. Right, episode 3. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Episode 3 of Planet Sport. As you can tell, I'm very excited because the Premier League is coming back. But before we get into that, of course, I'm going to do my usual little intro. Obviously, I'm Tom Parker. I have Sam Ketch next to me.
Howdy.
Yeah, Matthew Robinson is at the bottom. It's just how it is. I'm sorry, Matt. It's nothing against you. Now, today, obviously, we have a different sponsor. I would like to say, go and check out, support Sisters Sporting Suicide as well. Despite them not being the sponsor for this episode, we might as well just push forward them as well, considering they are, an important page, I guess. They cover important topics. So we'll also introduce our new sponsor for this episode, which is, if I can actually read this properly, Bake to Sweet Perfection team, who actually, interestingly, provide monthly baking challenges. So if any of you two love to bake cakes or anything, I'm sure you could probably get joined in on that. Personally, I'm absolutely terrible. So
I can't bake either.
Might give it a go once we get back to uni. But yeah, they provide monthly baking challenges and giveaways as well to their followers on Instagram. So I'm definitely gonna go and give them a follow. Maybe get some free cake for when I come back. So if you do want to get involved, then you can follow them at Baked to Sweet Perfection on Instagram. All one word, no underscore, no capitals, nothing. Simple as. So at Baked to Sweet Perfection at Instagram.com. Where you can probably find a lot of different things, including sports news, including the Premier League, which, as you can tell by that terribly sung chant at the start, which I gave up through halfway because I thought, this is embarrassing for me. It's set to return on Wednesday. Now, this has been sort of the biggest, is it going to happen, of the summer so far. So, Sam, what are you actually expecting from this restart? Do you think that clubs are going to, teams, I should say, do you think they're not going to be at the races straight away, are they?
I think that the difference between this league and the others when they've returned is that the Premier League has been enabled to have behind closed doors friendlies, either intra-squad or against other clubs. So I think that some of the cobwebs that we saw first week of the Bundesliga are going to be removed from the Premier League's return. But I do think that perhaps the Man City Arsenal game will be a good judge of just how far off the pace the players are, because it's a match we've seen countless times over the years. It's supposed to be the elite level. If they can't run around for 90 minutes without needing both sides needing all 5 subs, that's probably going to be an indicator of how far off the pace they are.
Yeah, Matt, would you agree with that? Do you think that teams are going to struggle, I guess, at the start to sort of get to the similar pace? We saw Arsenal, of course, struggle against Brentford in the clips that were surfaced on Twitter defensively. So do you think that's going to be a theme of the restart?
Yeah, I think so. I think these clubs that have had, we've had 3-4 months now where we've not really had any proper fixtures. There has been a bit of training going on more recently, but there has been long enough that they're not going to be in the flow of it. And we could see some clubs really struggle at the start of the season.
Of course, one of the main sort of talking points was broadcasting as well, because obviously this is going to be the main source of entertainment for a lot of fans. The Premier League has a massive hold worldwide, in particular, of course, England. It's absolutely huge. It's, the biggest sporting competition. Now, obviously, we have 4 platforms at the moment confirmed, which was the BBC, Amazon Prime, Sky, and BT. Now, how do you think TV networks are going to learn maybe from the previous leagues? For example, the Bundesliga, they've tried out crowd noise. I think Sky actually confirmed that they will be using crowd noise from FIFA 20 interestingly. And fans can actually vote on an app to pick which chant they want to
I like
play,
that.
which I think is pretty cool. I think that's for the fan zone. I'm not sure if that's for every fan. Otherwise, it would just take way too long to get the voting process put through. But do you think that that's the right way to go about it? Do you think that that's the best way to keep fans immersed?
Yeah, and it keeps the commentators engaged. We've had the conversations multiple times before about how weird it is listening to silent stadiums. It's one thing that the commentators have to adapt to there being no crowd. It's another thing to then like enhanced crowd noise. That's they have to be pretty good at mastering this noise and getting it in at the right points. Otherwise, it's going to look pretty weird if a goal goes in and the home crowd start cheering, even though it's for the away team. It's going to be interesting to see how the producers deal with that.
I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, we've seen with UFC. I mean, UFC isn't 90 minutes of football. It's only five-minute rounds. So it's only 25 minutes, and it still feels quite empty, even with the commentators. So I think adding that noise, giving it a bit more atmosphere, and as you say, using FIFA sounds, which when you play FIFA, it does sound like a football match. So that could be a really good idea.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it works. I think what they were planning on doing was essentially in the gallery having a sort of soundtrack that they can switch to. Anyone on a TV or radio production course might be able to back me up here. But I think what they're planning on doing is essentially making a soundtrack that they can switch through. So if an away team scores, it'll be quieter. If a home team scores, it'll be louder. They'll play different sounds depending on how far teams get up the pitch. Which they tried a bit in the Bundesliga, but it was very it was just sound. It wasn't as reactive, of course, as it would be with an actual crowd, but it didn't quite sound right. So if they can master that, I genuinely think that it could keep fans immersed. Of course, clubs have had mosaics. Brighton, for example, are allowing people to have cardboard cutouts of themselves, similar to Borussia Mönchengladbach in the Bundesliga. Now, do you think that that's a good idea? I mean, obviously, it's a quick buck for clubs. For example, Brighton, I think it was £20 to get a cardboard cutout. So, is it profiting off fans, or is it? Do you think that it does genuinely just add a little bit of extra fun to everything?
Both. It's weird that football and sport generally is held with such disregard for trying to make money. There are businesses at the end of the day. Nobody is slaughtering other companies that are reopening on Monday as we record. Nobody's saying to them, you're only opening because you're selling shoes or whatever. So, of course, Premier League clubs are going to look to make money when they're not getting ticket sales, merchandise, and anything like that. They're probably estimating that the fans who are going to pay the 20 quid are maybe parents with kids who want to sort of still feel that normal thing, or the hardcore match day going fans who would pay 20 quid for their whole day, maybe more anyway.
Yeah, I think it is. I agree with that. Really, I mean, how much did you say it was? £20 for?
Yeah, about
for one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, some people might look at that and say that's a little bit steep, maybe for a cardboard cutout. But it's getting your face there, getting that cardboard cutout in the stands. You might see it on the TV, and as you say, for families that might be something that they want to go for, and as well with sort of some of the financial struggles that we are seeing with the lack of ticket sales and matches. I mean, it might provide a nice boost for the clubs.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you make, to be fair. Of course, if you go to a match, you pay what, £30 for a ticket. So £20 for, yes, you don't get to go to the game, but £20 to have a cardboard cutout, or for example, I'll mention again, but £7, for example, to get your face on that Wolves mosaic that they put out. It's sort of in essence replaces it. It's not the same, but for £7 or £20, it's less than a match day ticket, and depending on broadcasting, you'll still be able to see the games. So I do certainly think that I'd agree with you two in saying that it is a mixture of both, but I think that it does provide extra revenue for the clubs involved. And, if we're talking about revenue, of course, the most important factor in terms of revenue, especially for clubs, is the TV stations themselves. Now, I previously mentioned that we have BBC for the first time since 1992 are going to be broadcasting free to air First Division football, of course, since the Premier League began. We then have Amazon Prime, who've recently sort of taken the live football streaming service by storm, especially around Christmas. I remember plenty of people raving about the fact that you could turn the commentators off, which was quite a niche thing to do. We also have, of course, the big boys in Sky and BT. Now, Sky, I think, have got 64 games in their package, and I think they're making 24 of those free to air, either on Sky One or one or the other, main event, whatever they have. BT, I think, are going to be doing similar. Of course, BBC, I think, I've got 4 or 5 games, which of course are free. And then Amazon Prime for paying customers, they'll have games as well. And
I think the Amazon Prime ones are actually going to be free to air as well.
Right, okay, so that makes a lot. Okay, I'm surprised about that. Well, that's the question I was actually going to bring up, is that do you think that they should try and make as many of these free to air as possible? Or do you think that they're right in, they've paid for the rights? So do you think that it's fair, really, that they're sort of sticking to it? Because a lot of fans want the matches to be all free to air. Do you think that's unrealistic?
There's an element of understanding how their business model works, which is that they thrive on being able to put things behind the paywall, especially Sky and BT, and making you subscribe. Even for the minimum package, it's extremely expensive. It's one of the main reasons why people want a sole recording thing from the Premier League, which would be cheaper to subscribe to and could be sold globally. The problem is that they've just had 3 or 4 months of people subscribing to Sky, BT, whatever, and having nothing but like Flashback or whatever to show to them. So they need to find the balance between sticking loyal to people who paid 3-4 months worth of subscription and everyone else who is a football fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly with the 92 matches left and the fact that all of them are going to be on the TV, I feel as if people aren't, if there is football sort of every day, essentially, I feel as if people aren't going to have the time, and people perhaps aren't going to want to watch all 92 matches. So perhaps the broadcasters have got to pick and choose their battles when they're going to try and get an audience, and especially Amazon Prime, when they've only got the 4 matches, I believe. If they can bring in a massive audience with those 4 matches, perhaps arguably not the best matches to have either, if they can bring in large audiences, it can make a statement to the Premier League to say, look, we can get this audience, we can get these people here, and perhaps that can benefit them in contract negotiations in the future for getting better and more games.
Well, yeah, I'd agree with the Amazon Prime thing, certainly. Of course, when they took the rights over at Christmas for that 2-week period, you had 2 or 3 games on at the same time that you could flick between. You could turn the commentary off. You could keep the crowd sounds. They certainly added extra elements that you simply can't do on a TV broadcast. They showed us, I think, a glimpse into how useful or practical or efficient, whatever word you want to use, streaming football could be. There was live stats that would pop up on the screen if you chose to want that. You could take a look at the match stats in game whilst the game is playing live. That sort of thing, I think, will definitely, like you said, draw an audience because it's new, it's different, and it's more interactive. You can choose how you want to experience it. For example, BT Sport. I see a lot of people on Twitter or YouTube complaining about Steve McManaman, right? So they can't choose whether to listen to him or not. If he's on co-commentary, that's it. Whereas on Amazon Prime, they have that choice. And I think that customers love that element of choice. They don't want to be force-fed something. They want to pick and choose what they want to watch. It's like a game. You're not going to watch Burnley Brighton with respect to those clubs if Liverpool Man United is on. You're going to choose the one that you feel will be the better experience. So I think that in terms of that, Amazon Prime, I think will, like you said, need to make the most of it. And if they can genuinely come up with a more interactive thing, maybe have live polls at half-time, full-time, that sort of thing, you could certainly see them flying up in terms of popularity as they already did around Christmas.
I think they also showed us something quite interesting with that Christmas stuff, which was that games would kick off with intervals that meant that you could, whilst one was at half time, you could go and watch the other one for the first 15 minutes and then go back.
Yeah.
And this is obviously going to be the first time where there aren't going to be 3 p.m. games because of the way they're spacing them, and any 3 p.m. games that are there are going to be broadcast live. And it's an interesting look to the future, because do we go down the route that Amazon took us down, which is constantly spacing out the games so you can flick between them and you're not missing any action? Or do we keep the 3 p.m. Like sort of watershed almost? Nobody's allowed to broadcast them live, and you've got Football Focus and stuff like that doing sort of score updates, and you're not allowed to show the highlights until 5:30, 6 p.m. It's going to be interesting seeing how next season they breach that sort of subject, because a lot of people will say now there's no more need for no games at 3 p.m. to be on TV, because it's not worked. It was designed to make people go to football matches, and instead it just created a brand new genre of football television, which was Soccer Saturday. BT have their own, BBC, they all have their own.
Yeah,
it hasn't worked as a premise to stop people from just sitting at home and watching it. It's maybe time to rethink how that works and redesign 3 p.m. kickoffs.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think however you come up with this set of rules, if people want to go to the football, people will go to the football. It's a day out. It's an experience. It's something that is, live sport is like no other thing. You go there, you watch, and you're invested in it. Whereas if you want to stay at home, perhaps, and you want to watch the highlights, you want to watch Soccer Saturday, you want to watch whatever other football program is on TV, you're going to do that. And I think now in the age where we've got 4 broadcasters now who are broadcasting all of the matches, I don't think there's any reason why we can't have all of the matches available to everyone, so that certain fans aren't getting left out. If you're a Burnley fan and you're living in London, you can't get to the Burnley match, and Burnley might not always be the main kickoff because Liverpool have got it every week or something. You might feel a little bit left behind. And I think if we can provide for everyone, that might benefit broadcasters and fans as well.
This is going to sound like quite an obvious question, but do you think that the BBC should be given more games for the Premier League? And in a sense, I'm quite surprised ITV haven't got in on this as well, considering they broadcast quite a few of the World Cup matches, England matches. I think it's quite unusual that, considering they get a decent amount of advertising revenue, that they haven't quite maybe gone for a couple of Premier League games. They used to do the Champions League, of course. So it is a bit unusual that they haven't got that. But do you think that the BBC or ITV next season, of course it's a case of money, but do you think every now and again it would be better to have some Premier League games on those channels that people just have through their packages?
I'd rather that the free-to-air stuff was lower down stuff, to be honest with you. If you're going to, I'm not advocating for this, but if you want to watch the Premier League and you don't subscribe to anything, there are ways and means of watching it at 3 p.m. using international broadcasters.
We don't
I don't endorse it or advocate it, but there's ways of doing that. But the free-to-air stuff, a lot of football fans, as Matt mentioned about Burnley fans living in London, imagine it's non-league fans living away from home, or League 2, League 1, who get a 11 p.m. midnight show on Quest, is it now, as highlight packages. I mean, it's not really fair that the Premier League has every TV slot pretty much for football, and then past midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, you get 2 seconds of one goal from your League 2 club's match. It's time to sort of look at this and go, okay, I don't believe there's the need for 92 professional clubs plus all of the non-league ones that are as well. But if we're going to have them as professional clubs, BBC, ITV, Channel 4 even, there's slots open at 3 p.m. that you could stick some football in, maybe 3 weeks in a season. Next year, you can look at it and go, we'll have a League One or League Two day and just have live football. Those clubs would get a bit of broadcasting revenue, which could keep them alive. And you take that monopoly away from Sky, who at the moment can show one championship game a month and consider that fine.
Yeah, I think definitely lower leagues would benefit from being shown on sort of ITV and BBC. I guess the only question that is there that sort of want for that? I think you probably have to choose which games you air quite carefully to make sure that you could get the audience, because, you know, if you're just a generic football fan, like you will watch the Premier League, you will watch those big matches because they are the big matches against the best teams. And maybe people might look at it, the championship, and League One and think, well, perhaps not. I don't really have as much of a draw of that because maybe they think it matters less. But I think definitely if the BBC probably wouldn't, and possibly ITV as well, possibly couldn't afford to go into a battle with BT and Sky Sports. So it definitely might be an interesting one to look at putting some lower league games on the sort of main channels.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think as long as there's that draw there, you know, you can't just spend money for the sake of spending money on creating a whole show and then not getting that sort of that money back from a good audience. But yeah, I certainly agree with that. I think lower league clubs could do with a bit more exposure, really. And I personally enjoy non-league football. I think it's more down to earth. I think that's probably why a lot of people like it, especially on YouTube. But if we move on from football, I think we've probably got us a good amount of discussion out of that topic now. We have big boxing news, of course. The biggest boxing story is now that AJ against Tyson Fury could be happening. Financial terms agreed for the two fights, not just one, two. So there is going to be two fights. I guess one of the questions is that do they owe it to the UK fans to have the fight here in the UK?
Yeah, they're both UK fighters. I've already seen the premise of a home and away leg being sort of floated around, one in London, one in Manchester, you know, engage the two fan bases as though it's a football match. It's a weird premise. I think that they've not got that same sort of divine loyalty from people in Manchester, people in London supporting them, but having them stay in the UK, maybe it's not as profitable for the fighters and everyone else, but it sticks more to the fact that it's two British boxers going for the world titles.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think the UK, two of arguably the biggest names in UK boxing, certainly at the moment. It would be good to see, and I quite like the idea of the sort of home and away leg. I think that would be an interesting one, and I think when fights are in America, it often makes it a bit more difficult to watch it in the UK because often the times there's like 3, 4, 5 a.m. And a lot of people, if you're a generic, if you're not sort of a hardcore fan or you don't have a sort of real interest in it, you probably aren't going to stay up till 4 a.m. because that can be a bit disruptive to your sleeping. But if you had the fight here, you know, audiences in America, the times would be probably more suitable. They'll probably have good pay-per-view numbers over there. And, you know, that might be good for broadcasters and also the atmosphere in the stadium if it's two UK fighters.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that this is a fight that everyone's been excited about for ages, really. Of course, they've still got their respective fights to actually do. I mean, AJ's got a fight. Is it Pulev? And then Fury. There's still that weird stuff with Wilder going on for that third fight. I think potentially. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I mean, it certainly seems to be the fight that everyone's looking to. I don't know whether. Well, obviously, we don't know when it's going to happen this year. Obviously, it's not going to happen this year. We're probably looking at late 2021, possibly. I think, for this one, probably around October time, because you've got to wait until you can. I think for this fight, you've got to wait until you can have crowds again. You cannot have this behind closed doors. It's just it'd be such a waste of an atmosphere and revenue, especially for boxing. And I think Wembley and maybe the Etihad or Old Trafford, maybe Wembley and Old Trafford would probably be the best venues. Would you say you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they probably might use Tottenham Hotspur's new
That's a good
stadium.
shout.
Oh, that's a good shout, actually, because they're using that for AJ's. Well, they might be using that for AJ's next fight, right? If that gets put back on. So, do you reckon this? I mean, is this fight bigger than the money involved? Because obviously, a lot of people will talk about the money involved in the fight, but is this something bigger? Is this more symbolic? I guess it's the young British boxer against the returning, champion. That sort of that redemption story against the up and coming. Or I don't know where you class AJ as up and coming anymore, but the sort of the golden boy of British boxing, I guess. Is this bigger than the money involved?
It's an interesting one. I think the amount of titles that could be, let's not, determine the results of the two fights still to be done, but there's a lot of titles on the line. So the money will probably be incredibly large as well. We don't, until we know the exact numbers, I don't want to say if it is bigger. There's more symbolism to it, especially with what's going on in the world at the moment and how there are definitely two camps splitting off to the different fighters. It's going to be interesting if, given that we're probably a year away from the fight, if there's still the attitudes towards both boxers that there are at the moment.
It'd be interesting to see if there's any Winston Churchill fans in the stadium supporting Tyson Fury. You're going to say something, Matt? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree. I agree with that. I mean, I think, I agree.
Flawless, Sam. He's got nothing to say. You've hit the nail on the head. That's when you know you've done a good job. And everyone just agrees. So moving on from boxing, obviously, we don't have too much information on that fight at the moment. It's just the fact the fight is confirmed. So obviously, I think there'll be more hype and excitement towards when we actually start getting, details of venues and stuff like that. We'll certainly have more to talk about. So let's just hope it's not in Saudi Arabia, I guess, or somewhere ridiculous where, barely anyone will be able to go, and it'll just be late at night or in the morning, that sort of thing. Anyway, so we move on. Now, last time we actually spoke about Disneyland, surprisingly, and how amazing Disneyland is, and their ESPN, what is it, the World Center of Sports?
World of Sport, I believe it's called. ESPN World of Sport.
Now, for the viewers who don't know, we actually took a look behind the scenes after the episode at this complex, and it is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's like a baseball stadium. There's about 5 baseball pitches, about 10 football pitches. It's absolutely mad.
Yeah, it's like a tennis complex with like 10 courts and everything, like a main 1,000-seater center court. It's ridiculous, the size of it.
Basketball arenas as well, which obviously they're going to be using for the NBA. But we're here to talk about the MLS and the MLS is back tournament that they've been campaigning to promote as much as possible. I find this quite weird. I don't know why, but it seems a bit odd having a tournament and then just going straight into the normal season. Like, why would you just not resume the normal season? I'm a bit confused as to why they have to have this made up tournament, essentially.
Because they were so close to the start of the season. I think they'd only played 1 or 2 games. So it's almost like there's all of those weeks they've missed, because obviously they're a calendar year tournament, not a September, May like the Premier League.
Yeah.
So they've missed so many games that cramming them in the way the Premier League's trying to start again for the autumn would be incredibly bad, especially for a sport that's not, too popular there. The crowd numbers would probably decrease, especially because they charge absolute premiums in America for everything. I think they've found something to do that maybe gets fans on side, and it's very American in style, like a knockout system rather than an actual league or anything like that.
They're still avoiding that non-relegation as well, which annoys me.
So what is the actual structure of the tournament? How is it going to work?
Well,
that's what I'm interested in. I don't think I quite understand the actual how it's actually going to work.
Does. No one does apart from the Americans.
I don't think anyone does, but I will do my best. I watched a video on the MLS website explaining this, so I'm glad you asked, Matt, because this will test my knowledge on this tournament. So what it seems to be is that there's 6 groups split, 3 each way for the Eastern and Western Conference, as they normally have for the MLS. Now, in the Eastern Conference, I think they have a group with 6 teams and 2 groups with 4. Then in the Western Conference, they have 3 groups of 4, sorry. So you'll have 3 leagues or groups, like the Champions League, for example, or the Europa League, any knockout style. And you'll have, I'm not entirely sure, but it might be the top 2 teams. So there's 4 teams. So you'll have the top 2 go through as usual, and then they'll play the knockout style, and then you'll have the teams in the final. Now, the actual winnings for this is a place, weirdly enough, it is a place in the CONCACAF Champions League, $1.1 million. And apparently the points for this go towards the regular season.
So I've done a bit of additional reading on this. So only the group stage games count for points towards the regular season. And I think because they play each team twice and then some teams a third time with a random, whether it's home or away, they're basically just going to cut off those third games, I'm pretty sure. So just play each team twice. The CONCACAF Champions League one is interesting because the way they put their teams in is already baffling enough. It's the top 4 teams, and then they have these weekends where they do derby days. So each team plays their rival, if they've got one. And the Canadian one counts. So the winner of that, like who wins the overall record in the 3 games between the 2 Canadian teams, gets the Champions League spot.
So they play each other, and then whoever wins plays the Canadian teams, and then whoever beats the Canadian teams.
No. So literally just Toronto and Montreal play each other 3 times in the season. So that's a guaranteed they're going to play each other 3 times. And whoever has the better overall record gets the spot in the CONCACAF Champions League. Because Canada's professional league only started like 2 years ago and doesn't have any CONCACAF Champions League spots, one of the Canadian teams needs it. So, this is why Americans shouldn't be allowed to run their own soccer league, because that's ridiculous.
But when I saw that, so I was watching, because I thought it was just a fun little tournament that they were going, let's play at Disneyland. And we've sort of got off track here, the fact that it is being played at Disneyland. But when I saw that the winner qualifies for the CONCACAF Champions League, I was like, surely it just doesn't seem right. It's just weird, isn't it? It's just they've made up this tournament, and then if you win it, you get a Champions League place. So if the Premier League did a Premier League is back cup, and whoever wins it gets Man City's Champions League spot, and then somehow Norwich just end up batting.
I'm in favour, yeah.
I mean, it'd be fun, but it would ruin the integrity of the competition. But do you not think? I just think it's so odd. Like, it's such a weird concept.
It's odd. It seems like they just need to take things back a couple of steps and just think through. Just make it so everyone understands it first. Might be a good start.
Do we actually like this concept? Is this a good concept, or is this just it's just a moneymaker, isn't it? Essentially,
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of an odd one. I mean, I quite like the idea of like a tournament, but it seems contributing to the season and trying to give it like just odd.
It seems like it probably should have been like pre-season that they tried this. Like before they actually started their season back in February, they should have gone, does this work? Let's have a little look, rather than just playing academy teams and stuff.
I just find it absolutely hilarious. They're calling it the MLS's Back Cup, even though they played one game. So they played one game of their season. But at least the Premier League is what, like 28, 29 games in. MLS, they were one game in. And it's like, yes, the league's back. So, you barely started. You might as well just call it the MLS Restart Cup, or
literally this could be their like friendlies before that they could get the sort of get themselves out of the cobwebs, get them sort of in the motion of playing football again, and then just start again.
I'm just fuming that the team that wins this gets a flipping Champions League. What, they're playing at Disneyland. Come on. Oh yeah, man. I mean, do you think it's going to work? Because in terms of the actual logistics of it, because we already have all the NBA teams there at camping out. Of course, with all the protests going on at the moment, there's been plenty of people that haven't been isolating. Whether you're for or against that, it's neither here nor there. It's still the fact that people are still going out in their droves and potentially, getting the virus. And then obviously you've got all the MLS teams. You've got all the MLS teams. You've got all the NBA teams there, camera crews, staff. I mean, it is a massive complex, but do you think that this logistically will work with having all the teams in one place?
I was only going to say, after you mentioned the comments, it does feel like literally everything that was going on when we started this show, 4 weeks ago, about, people staying safe, staying safe. No, that's gone. Just go and stand next to someone if you fancy it. That's always been the American attitude. But yeah, I mean, at this point, keeping them all in one place is probably sensible, because you'd hope that they wouldn't descend on Disneyland with the riots. But
you can't
at this point.
Disneyland. Come on, it's Disneyland. People love sports people as well. The citizens love sports people. They're not going to attack them.
Not in America.
Yeah, I guess so. Do you think this is additional pressure on the players? Because I've never been a fan of the MLS system, in the sense that if you finish 6th out of a 12-team division, you get in the playoffs. For me, that doesn't quite instill the same mentality as if you had a top 2, and that's it. If you don't get top 2, that's not success. I find that kind of a lazy league system. As Ibrahimovic said, it's I can't repeat what he said because it's not family friendly, but we all know what he thinks. I think many people have had the same comment. No promotion, no relegation. How boring. They have a second division, right, that teams can't get promoted from.
The weird thing with America is that sole monopoly one division thing, where obviously there's the old cliche of, world champions of baseball, and they're the only nation to do it. But that sort of, World Series and stuff, it's a premise that seems to have worked in everything other than football, because we're all so used to the idea of promotion relegation, especially for a country the size of America. They should probably have it, given the amount of clubs they've got. But it's not that long ago that their entire football system was just semi-pro stuff, like essentially non-league. Because it wasn't that long ago when they had like the 80s, when they got Cruyff, Pele, everyone like that to go over and play, and just put them in parks with big stands that no one was turning up for. Now at least there's a system, a league that they can play. We're probably 20 years away from them putting in promotion relegation, but it's still like the 5th, 6th most popular sport there.
Yeah, I guess that leaves the only sort of incentive as to sort of win that league as financial, I assume. I can't claim to know much about the second division, but you often see players in over here in the Championship, League One. Promotion means so much to them, and that's what they strive for throughout the season. And without that, are people really going to try as hard? Give it 100%. If there isn't that sort of end of season reward. Yeah,
that's the thing. It's like, as long as we finish in the playoffs, we can still finish 6th and win the league. Yeah. But you can still finish 6th, win the playoffs, and that's you won the league. Like, for me, that doesn't sit right with me. I mean, you could say the same thing about the championship. You know, the team that finishes sixth could beat the team that finished third, right, and win the playoffs. But I think it's a 24 team league, right? And it's a very small amount, right? Third to sixth is what, like third, fourth, fifth. It's 4 teams, right?
Yeah, on both sides as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's not the same ratio. If you've got a 12 team league and sixth place mid table gets you in the playoffs and potentially winning the league, right? That's not just like getting, at least if you win the league in the championship or you finish first or second, you're up. If you come first in the MLS, you might still not.
Yeah, you get a trophy for like the Supporters' Shield, which is the top team or the most points in the regular season.
Yeah.
But I suppose they have the same in all of their things. They have the playoffs, and it's that idea of, you know, everyone does like knockout competition and putting the best, however many. Perhaps they should shrink that end of season thing and do it top 8, 4 from each side, and have just straight in at the quarterfinals rather than that weird system where they jump. So some teams jump around, other teams play like, it's just all very confusing. But I mean, you say 24 teams, it's now 26 as of this season. So the 2 new teams. Next year, they're adding in another club, that's 27. And the longer that goes on, at what point do they look at it and go, okay, 32 teams is now mental? You know, how, at what stage? Yeah, at what stage do they look at it and go, either we stop taking teams or we revise the system?
I think it is different for them because obviously they're such a big country that, you know, they do have to have 2. It's like the you know, non-league in here. We have the Vanarama North and South. You know, it's a similar sort of thing. It's like, well, it would be tough. I can understand why they have this league and then knockout system, because then, you know, because the actual areas the teams are based in are so spread out.
And I could understand that if they weren't crossing over during the season and East playing West all the time. It's not like they only play in their division and then the playoffs is the one time for East versus West. It's literally the entire season. And the way they combat that is to sort of level the advantages. Is you're only allowed X amount of private flights. The rest of them have to be with the general public and stuff like that. But in reality, it just makes it even more contrived. And by adding more and more complicated measures to make it fairer, they've just confused anyone who they want to try and bring in and like make support the league. It's a mental system.
I do think it would be beneficial for them to add promotion relegation. Like, I genuinely think that could be massive, like for the MLS. It just adds so much more than just the sort of, if you finish bottom, it doesn't matter. Like, it literally doesn't have any effect on your club.
You get first draft pick.
So if anything, you're praised in a sense, or you gain something from finishing bottom, which makes no sense to me.
I mean, I guess it's similar though to the way the NFL works, and that there's about 32 teams split across 2 divisions with 4 in each division, 4 groups in each division. And yeah, like finishing lower down grants you higher places in the draft, which helps to improve. And I guess that can be a tool to try and stop sort of like clubs with the most money dominating. I mean, has that really worked? Arguably not. But I presume that they're doing a similar thing, and they probably don't want to introduce relegation because that brings it more to what we have over here than what sort of how American sports generally is.
Yeah, I think it's very much they want their own franchise, and obviously that's the key word, franchise. They are building a brand like the Premier League, but I think because promotion relegation is instilled in every country except America. I can't think of another league in the world that has no promotion or relegation. Even the American Samoan leagues have promotion relegation. I mean, on Football Manager, I got promoted from the second American Samoan division to the first American Samoan division with Pago Boys beating Sam in the process. So even they have promotion and relegation, and they're a tiny little island, right?
An American island as well.
American island, ironically, as well. So it just baffles me. I know this is obviously, we've gone into a bit, I've gone into a bit of a rant about the MLS, but this tournament, I watched the promotional video. I just thought, this is so American. It just makes no sense. MLS is back, even though they only played one game. It's at Disneyland, and you get a Champions League place. I mean, come on, give me a break. It's ridiculous. I'm not happy. I'm really not happy with it. I think for my own sanity, it's probably best if we move on to the UFC. Obviously, it was the Fight Island was announced, probably similar to the MLS Cup, to be honest. Fight Island. Oh, sounds intense. Sounds a bit like one of those reality TV shows, like I'm a Celeb or something. So we have the UFC Fight Island. It's been announced as 4 events that are going to take place on Yas Island. No, that's not a bunch of white girls going, yes, that's an actual island. That is an actual island in Abu Dhabi. I'm so sorry. So again, it's that idea of centralized sport, isn't it? You pick one venue. We're seeing this. We spoke about this actually with the Champions League and Europa League, which is pretty much being confirmed now. As I think Eintracht Frankfurt's stadium will play host to all of the games for the remainder, and they will be the centralized area for the Europa League to continue. I found that rather strange. Obviously, we discussed the potential of playing it in Poland and Ukraine and having them co-host it essentially and just stick to those areas. But from what we've seen in the Europa League, I'm not too sure how true it is, but I've seen it on the Express and Star and stuff like that. Is that Eintracht Frankfurt Stadium will be used to host all the remaining games. And we're seeing that with the MLS. We're seeing that with, boxing, with this whole thing that they wanted to do, the fight camp. We're seeing a lot, obviously with understandable reasons, centralized sport. And again, it's the Middle East. We've seen Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, places like that getting sporting events. They certainly look to be buying into the sporting scene for reasons, I guess, money or politics, maybe. I don't know. But how successful do we think this will be in terms of a UFC event?
I mean, I know that we've obviously already had some UFC events. I believe we've had 2 or 3 now in America, and I know that the Fight Island was raised as a sort of thing before this, sort of to combat the like social distancing and having it as you say, the centralized sporting location as an island that they could do all this stuff on and potentially bring back UFC before anything else, and that didn't happen at the start. So I do kind of question why we need the Fight Island now. I mean, yes, Abu Dhabi wants the sport, but is there really a need for the Fight Island? Could we not just have it in an Abu Dhabi venue? I'm just not quite sure like why the island is needed when we've already brought back UFC. We're starting to see more sport come back when this was an idea that was raised beforehand to kind of bring it back sooner.
Maybe it's that element of publicity. For both sides, it works a little bit. We're like, sometimes we question why they do these things, and then in doing so, we're bringing in their big policy that they're not telling you about, which is that I wouldn't have known where UFC were going to be fighting each weekend if they hadn't told us it was going to be Yas Island or whatever. So it's sort of like now it's ingrained in my mind. Okay, they're going to be fighting there, but as you say, I don't know how necessary it is. I mean, everything seems to be coming back, however slowly. So it doesn't seem too necessary to stick them all on a random island in the Middle East. Sorry, but
It really does sound like a reality TV show.
It does. The thing is, that's
does.
what I think. If we've got a name like UFC Fight Island, why don't we, instead of having like 4 or 5 fights per night, why don't we have like a battle royale, Hunger Games style thing with 12 fighters going out and the last one standing, standing wins.
I genuinely thought you were going to suggest members of the public. Instead of UFC fighters, just get members of the public, put them on Yas Island, and then get them all to like fight.
Get some influencers.
It could be
stick them on Yas Island.
Yeah, exactly. The most hated YouTubers, and just put them there and just see what happens. Us not included. We're very much loved by the YouTube. I do think it could be a next step for UFC. They could go into sort of like triathlons, I guess. If they're on an island, you could have the fighters swim 100 meters and then swim back, and then do the fight, and then do like jogging. You know,
do some skipping.
Yeah, it could be a way for the UFC to expand on already very physically fit specimens. I mean, is this just for the male fights, or are they going to have female fights as well for this fight island? That would be interesting, because otherwise your battle royale thing would be a bit unfair, wouldn't it?
Yeah. They could have one weekend where it's the male battle royale, second week is female, and then alternating from then on.
I think
until there's no UFC fighters left.
Well, at least one. Not Conor McGregor in there as the host as well. That'd be quite.
Yeah, he'd probably get involved.
He could do the voiceover.
Oh no, that'd end up like Royal Rumble. They'd just have Khabib turn up and sort of like final fight. No matter who wins, just those two are going at it.
Mm.
Yeah, he just takes his mic off and he appears on the island, and then the final duel is Khabib McGregor, and that's how they announce the fight.
It'd feel very WWE style, just like sort of out of nowhere he comes. Like they love doing that at the WWE, but I'm surprised we haven't heard anything about them doing something similar. You know, shipping all of their fighters off to one place and getting on with it.
Good luck trying to find John Cena. I think that's quite a funny joke. No one can see him, apparently. I'm losing it.
Yes, you are, yeah.
I really am. It's the MLS. It's taken out. I've lost brain cells. I've lost brain cells watching that advertising video for it. The MLS is back. Right. No. Right. Disneyland aside, UFC, Fight Island, reality TV, triathlon things aside, that's pretty much all we have for this week. I think we've made it quite a bit more of a relaxed show this week, I guess, as if we weren't relaxed enough already. But, you know, I think the Premier League coming back is probably what most people care about. I mean, at least we don't have to choose affiliate clubs. Well, you might have to, Sam. Matt, who do you support? Do you support some?
I'm in Premier League.
Yeah.
Newcastle.
Oh, okay. Well, Sam, you might have to choose a neutral team.
Nope, the championship's going to be back, pal. I can
of
still
course,
support
yes,
City.
20th of June. Yeah.
Yep.
I haven't even mentioned
I can watch us go down.
Of course. Tigers are being mauled by themselves. Yeah, so of course the championship is coming back. We didn't even speak about that. Ridiculous. I can't believe it. I forgot about the championship.
Don't want to speak about it.
No one cares about the championship as much. That's why. Doesn't get as many clicks as Fight Island. All the MLS is back. So, right. That's all we've got time for, though. Once again, thank you for watching. Thanks for the support. We've had a pretty successful start to the show. Make sure that you followed Baked to Sweet Perfection on Instagram. Get those cakes. I certainly will be. I really need some cake. I've barely eaten any cake over the past couple of months. I just really need some. Please, someone out there. I'll send you my address. Just send me some cake. Anyway, thanks for watching. Join us for the next episode. And as always, take care.
Yeah.